Upon hearing the term kingship, I suppose the first idea or the first characteristic of kingship that comes to your mind is that kingship is hereditary. That is to say, after a king, it is invariably his son who assumes the throne. And in absence of a male heir, another member from the royal family itself comes to the throne, and this is how kingship is hereditary. Will you be surprised to know that kingship was not always hereditary? But how is it so? This is because in some cases, some kings established their dynasties without belonging to the royal family. That is to say, these persons did not have the royal blood, despite which they went on to establishing their own dynasties. Now this idea must be sounding very interesting to you. Interesting in the sense that a common person went on to establishing his own dynasty without having the royal blood. It is this that we will be taking up in today's lesson. Now when we talk about the new kings and kingdoms, we have to go back to medieval India. The establishment of new kingdoms in the Indian subcontinent started at around 7th century and it lasted till probably the 11th or 12th century. Now let us find out what those dynasties were and who were the rulers who got to establish their dynasties without belonging to the royal family. So let us begin our discussion on new kings and kingdoms in the Indian subcontinent that was founded during the medieval period. Now let me tell you a story that might be of interest to you. Suppose a man works as a servant under an owner or a clerk under a boss, and that person harbors the dream of being rich, of doing something good in life. But that person is not satisfied with working as just a servant or a clerk. Then one day, one fine morning, he decides to leave his job. And after leaving his job, he starts his own business. And in this process, he becomes rich and makes it big in life. Does this not sound like a dream to you? That a person who was initially a servant or a clerk left his job and went on to becoming a rich businessman. Now let me tell you that this kind of a dream can also be achieved in reality. But why am I discussing this with you? As in, why am I talking about this dream-like setting with you? This is because this will be important when we talk about the establishment of the new kingdoms that started from the 7th century. How is it important to us? Because the time frame we are discussing here, during that period, often brahmanas gave up their traditional professions. Now you have to understand that brahmanas came on the highest rank in the social hierarchy, that is in the caste system. These people were generally learned men. Now they gave up their traditional professions of teaching and other scholarly activities, and they went on to establishing new kingdoms. This in a way also justifies the saying that humans are the architect of their own destinies. That is to say, if a person begins from scratch and with will and determination, that person might also make it big in life, and this same thing was done by the brahmanas during the medieval period. Now they gave up their traditional professions and they established new kingdoms. Now do you think it was very easy for them? Because these people did not initially belong to the royal family. They did not have the royal blood in them, but they went on to establishing their own dynasties, their own kingdoms. Now how did they do so? It is only on account of the brahmanas taking up military professions. That is, they took to arms. Took to arms in the sense that they started pursuing military professions, and by pursuing military professions, these brahmanas now established their own dynasties. Now let us find out about some of those dynasties and who founded those dynasties. The points we just raised brings us to a discussion on one such Brahmin. One such learned Brahmin in the Indian subcontinent was Mayura Sharma. And as a learned Brahmin, he came to receive education at Kanchi. Now you have to understand that Kanchi was the capital of the Pallava dynasty. So Mayura Sharma came to receive his education at Kanchi. But what happened at Kanchi? When he came to Kanchi to receive education, instead of attaining education or gaining anything from there, he was instead insulted by the Pallava officials. So, instead of gaining education at Kanchi, Mayura Sharma was met with humiliation and insult from the Pallava officials. But do you think Mayura Sharma swallowed that insult? He was okay with being insulted and humiliated by the Pallava officials? Definitely not. Because Mayura Sharma was a learned Brahmin, this we have already understood. Now to avenge this insult, this learned Brahmin then took up a military profession. This is a point that we have raised in the beginning of this discussion, that many learned Brahmins gave up their traditional professions, that is scholarly activities or teaching, and they instead took up traditional professions. And Mayura Sharma did the same thing when he was insulted by the officials of the Pallava dynasty at Kanchi. And after taking up a military profession, Mayura Sharma then went on to defeating the Pallavas. Now can you imagine how willful and determined Mayura Sharma was? Only to avenge his insult, he took up a military profession and then went on to waging a war against the Pallavas who were defeated. And with this, Mayura Sharma established the Kadamba dynasty. So this is one of the first instances of a learned Brahmin giving up his traditional profession and then taking up a military profession and founding a dynasty. Now when we began this discussion, we started by saying that these new kingdoms were established from the 7th century onwards. But the Kadamba dynasty that was founded by Mayura Sharma was from 345 to 540. By this you can understand that it was founded before the 7th century. Well, you also have to keep a point in mind that nothing happens without a precedence. That is to say, this was one of the first kingdoms that was established by a learned Brahmin, and this happened before the 7th century itself. So you can consider the Kadamba dynasty and Mayura Sharma a pioneering cause in this regard. So it was Mayura Sharma who established the Kadamba dynasty, and this dynasty ruled from 345 to 540. When Mayura Sharma established his Kadamba dynasty, it was Banavasi which was made the capital. So Banavasi was the capital of the Kadamba dynasty. Now a very important point that you have to remember about dynasties is that you have to take into account the geographical locations of the dynasties. These are very crucial because dynasties are always very much rooted in the geographical territories. And where was this Kadamba dynasty founded? This Kadamba dynasty was established in Karnataka. So this was the first dynasty to be established in Karnataka in the Indian subcontinent. Now let us go a little ahead in time. What do we find here? We find another dynasty that was founded by a person who did not belong to the royal family. And this dynasty was the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. This Gurjara Pratihara dynasty ruled from 700 to 975. Now you must be questioning who founded this dynasty. It was a person called Harichandra who founded this dynasty. A very crucial point that we raised previously is that the geographical location of any dynasty or any kingdom is very important, and in this regard we have to take into consideration the geographical location of the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. Harichandra founded this dynasty in Rajasthan, and after this dynasty was founded in Rajasthan, it also expanded in size. On this map, you can see the extent of the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty that was founded by Harichandra. Now you must be wondering who Harichandra was and how did he establish his own dynasty. Now let us find out what scholars have to say about Harichandra's origin or the origin of the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. Historians and scholars believe that the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty originated from the Gurjaras. Now who were the Gurjaras? These Gurjaras were pastoralists and fighters. So by now you have understood that this is also another classic example of someone founding a dynasty despite not belonging to the royal family. So these Gurjaras were pastoralists and fighters, and then they went on to establishing their own dynasty, that is the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty that was founded by Harichandra. So you can understand that how men from enterprising families took up military professions and then established their own dynasties. So these are few of the examples of the new kingdoms that were founded by people who did not belong to royal families. Now let us find out about few other dynasties or kingdoms that were also established by people who did not belong to royal families. In the beginning of this discussion, we discussed about the Kadamba dynasty. This Kadamba dynasty was a dynasty in the Karnataka region. Now there was another dynasty in the Karnataka region which was also not founded by people of the royal family. And this dynasty was the Chalukya dynasty. Now in this Chalukya dynasty, several kingdoms ruled, among which the earliest was the Chalukyas of Badami. The Chalukyas of Badami, as you can see on this map, ruled Karnataka from the 6th to the 8th century. So this is another instance in this regard of a new kingdom that was founded in the medieval period. Now let us find out how the Chalukyas are of great importance in this discussion. We talked about the Chalukyas who ruled in the Karnataka region from the 6th to the 8th century. Now there was another dynasty called the Rashtrakutas. The Rashtrakutas of the Deccan. Now in this regard you have to understand which region is the Deccan. The Deccan is the region that lies between the Western Ghats on the one hand and the Eastern Ghats on the other hand. So in this map you can see the southern portion of the Indian subcontinent is known as the Deccan region. Now the Rashtrakuta Empire of the Deccan were initially subordinates to the Chalukyas. The Chalukyas which is discussed were ruling Karnataka. Karnataka also falls in this Deccan region, and the Rashtrakutas were subordinates to the Chalukyas. But then the Rashtrakutas established their independent kingdom in 735. Now from this, few questions are coming to your mind, I presume. Firstly, how did the Rashtrakutas establish their independent kingdom? That is to say, how did they state their independence? And who were the subordinates? As in, what did the term subordinates mean in the context of medieval kingship? Now let us find out the answers to these questions. The time frame we are discussing in this lesson starts from the 7th century roughly. By this 7th century, in different parts of the Indian subcontinent, big landlords and warrior chiefs had emerged. So, landlords and warrior chiefs were now existing in different parts of the subcontinent. And why were these landlords or warrior chiefs important? It is because the kings who were ruling then acknowledged these landlords or warrior chiefs as the Samanthas. The Samanthas also meant the subordinates. So these landlords and warrior chiefs were given the titles of Samanthas or subordinates by the existing rulers. Now from this, what we have to discuss is that who were these landlords and warrior chiefs and why were they acknowledged as Samanthas or subordinates by the existing kings? So let us try to understand who these landlords or warrior chiefs were who had emerged by the 7th century in different parts of the Indian subcontinent. A landlord is a person who owns a tract of land and rents it to another person. That is, the ownership of land makes a person a landlord. And on the other hand, a warrior chief is a leader who exercises military, economic and political control over a territory. So landlords were people who owned lands or tracts of land and they rented these lands to other peasants and other cultivators for cultivation and agricultural purposes. And warrior chiefs were leaders who exercised their say in military, economic and political affairs. And together these landlords and warrior chiefs were expected to give gifts and military support to their overlords. That is to say, these landlords or warrior chiefs who were acknowledged as Samanthas or subordinates by the rulers were expected to give gifts and military supports to their overlords. Now let us find out what these landlords and warrior chiefs eventually did. Now we have to keep in mind that landlords were people who owned tracts of land and rented it to other persons. This means that the landlords were wealthy because ownership of land makes a person wealthy. And at the same time, the warrior chiefs were also influential. They were wealthy and influential on account of the power they enjoyed over military, economic and political affairs of a territory. By attaining wealth and power, these Samanthas were no longer wanting to restrict themselves to being Samanthas or subordinates only. You have to understand that as subordinates, they were on a rank lower to that of the king. That is, they were subordinates to the king. They were Samanthas of the kings. They were not kings themselves. Which is why after they started attaining wealth and property and power, they now wanted to declare themselves as independent. So in the process of declaring themselves independent, these Samanthas now assumed the title of Mahasamantha or Mahamandaleshwara. This means that the great lord of a circular region, and in this way they asserted their independence. Because on account of the power they had, the money and property they had, they were no longer willing to remain as subordinates. Which is why, to display their strength on account of their monetary power, their influence over their territories, the Samanthas were no longer willing to remain as subordinates to the rulers or kings. Which is why they now declared themselves as Mahamandaleshwara or Mahasamantha, and they declared their independence. And in this way, on account of their power, their wealth, they now started gaining their independence. But what did this independence mean for these Mahasamanthas or these Mahamandaleshwaras? With this, we come to a discussion on Dantidurga. Who was Dantidurga? Dantidurga was a Rashtrakuta chief during the mid-8th century. Now, why is he of any importance to us? This is because Dantidurga overthrew his Chalukyan overlord. Now we have understood that these Mahasamanthas or the Mahamandaleshwaras, on account of their power and wealth, asserted their independence. And in the process of asserting their independence from the king or their overlord, they had to overthrow their overlords. And the same thing was done by Dantidurga, who overthrew his Chalukyan overlord. Now what did he do after overthrowing his Chalukyan overlord? After overthrowing his Chalukyan overlord, Dantidurga performed a ritual. What was this ritual known as? This ritual was known as Hiranyagarbha, which literally means the golden womb. Now why is this ritual, that is the Hiranyagarbha, of any importance in our discussion? This is because this ritual or the Hiranyagarbha led to the rebirth of the sacrificer as a Kshatriya. Now for a second, try to quickly memorize the caste system. On the caste system, the highest rank or the highest rung was occupied by the Brahmins, who were learned men. Following them came the Kshatriya. The Kshatriya were the ruling class or the warriors. Now, in order to be a ruler or a king, a person needed to be a Kshatriya. Now, Dantidurga was not a Kshatriya. So, in order to become a Kshatriya, even though he was not one by birth, he performed this ritual called the Hiranyagarbha. And on account of this Hiranyagarbha, this sacrificer or Dantidurga now was reborn as a Kshatriya. And then he went on to founding the Rashtrakuta dynasty. So, the Rashtrakuta dynasty ruled in the Deccan region. And these Rashtrakutas were initially subordinates to the Chalukyas. And after overthrowing his Chalukyan overlord, Dantidurga established the Rashtrakuta dynasty. So, this you will be counting as another instance of a learned man or another person who does not belong to the royal family founding an entire dynasty by himself. Now, all this while we had been discussing about the dynasties or the kingdoms that were in the western half of the Indian subcontinent and the southern half of the Indian subcontinent. Now, let us move towards the northern part of the country and see what was happening there. Now, in the northern part of the country, a large empire was ruled by a very powerful ruler. This powerful ruler was Harshavardhana. Harshavardhana ruled a large empire in the northern India from 606 to 647. Now, after the decline of Harsha in the 7th century, now many new kingdoms arose in the northern and eastern India. So, it is one of those kingdoms in the northern and eastern India that we will now be discussing in this lesson. Now, let us move to this region of Bengal. Here in Bengal, in this area called Gaura, a ruler was ruling and his name was Shashanka. So, Shashanka of Gaura was ruling this region in Bengal. But after the death of Shashanka, there was anarchy in Bengal. Now, this was an obvious repercussion of the death of a ruler. Because after the death of a ruler, if there is no legal ascendant to the throne, there will be anarchy. And the same thing had happened in Bengal after the death of Shashanka of Gaura. Now, let us find out what happened after there was anarchy in Bengal and how this anarchy came to an end. So, there was anarchy in Bengal as we just discussed. The noblemen of the land now realized that they had to elect someone as their king. And the noblemen of this region of Bengal now elected Gopala. So, Gopala was a military chief, and the notable men who were living in that region now elected Gopala as the king to prevent anarchy, to prevent chaos from happening. So, after the death of Shashanka, anarchy followed in Bengal. And following that, it was Gopala who now came to the throne. And with this, Gopala founded the Pala dynasty in 750. Now, there is a paucity of resources when we try to understand the foundation of the Pala dynasty. Historians consider that Gopala founded the Pala dynasty in 750, which is why we consider that the Pala dynasty was founded in 750. Now, let us find out what was the extent of the Pala dynasty, that is to say, which were the regions that were ruled under the Pala dynasty. The Pala Empire or the Pala dynasty dominated eastern India till the middle of the 9th century. So, it is considered that this Pala dynasty was founded in 750 and it dominated eastern India till the middle of the 9th century. Now, this dynasty ruled for a long period and it also ruled over a large empire. It had the northern and eastern part of the subcontinent under its control. Now, Gopala was considered to be the first Buddhist king of Bengal, which is why Gopala is very important in the pages of history. Now after the death of Shashanka of Gaura, there was anarchy in Bengal. But when Gopala came to found the Pala dynasty, he unified Bengal. And simultaneously with unifying Bengal, he also brought Magadha or the present day Bihar under his control. So this entire region was unified and brought under the control of the Pala dynasty by Gopala. Now let me ask you a question quickly before finding out more about the Pala dynasty. Who was the first Buddhist king of Bengal? Was it Shashanka, Gopala, Dantidurga or Harshavardhana? Yes, you are right. It was Gopala who was the first Buddhist king of Bengal, and he founded the Pala dynasty in the year 750. Now Gopala founded the Pala dynasty in 750. He unified Bengal and saved it from further anarchy and chaos, and he also brought Magadha under his control. And after Gopala, it was his son Dharmapala who succeeded him. Dharmapala ruled from 770 to 810. Now Dharmapala was a very powerful ruler. He was a very able ruler who gave the Pala dynasty a new dimension. And it was during the rule of Dharmapala that the Pala dynasty became the most powerful kingdom in the northern and eastern India. On this map, you can see the extent of the Pala dynasty during the rule of Dharmapala from 770 to 1810. And from this map, you can also infer how great this empire was. That is, how great or how huge in size the Pala empire was. Now Dharmapala did a lot of important things when he was ruling as the ruler of the Pala dynasty. He is credited with the construction of a lot of things. As a powerful ruler, he also needed to keep himself safe in the pages of history, which is why he needed to construct certain things. Now Dharmapala founded the Vikramshila University at Bhagalpur in Bihar. In this image, you can see the Vikramshila University, and this was a major construction done by Dharmapala. And you can also understand that by constructing a university, Dharmapala also gave importance to the attainment of education. Simultaneously with the construction of the Vikramshila University at Bhagalpur, Dharmapala is also credited with the construction of a vihara at Somapura. Now from this, you must be wondering what a vihara is. Now do you know what a vihara is? You must be questioning like this kid as to what a vihara is. And in this image, you can see the vihara at Somapura that Dharmapala had constructed. Now let us find out what a vihara means. Viharas were constructed to provide shelter to the Buddhist monks. Now Buddhist monks led wanderer's life. That is to say, they roamed from one place to another without having permanent homes or shelters anywhere. Now when a person is leading a wanderer's life, it must be very difficult for him to stay somewhere during the monsoon season, because during the rainy season one cannot stay out in the open. And it is for this reason that Dharmapala had constructed this vihara at Somapura. Viharas were constructed with the purpose of providing shelter to the Buddhist monks, especially during the rainy season when it became increasingly difficult for them to lead the wanderer's life. And it is for this reason that this vihara at Somapura was constructed by Dharmapala. Now let us quickly wrap up this discussion by going over the various dynasties and kingdoms that we discussed in this lesson. We began with discussing the Kadamba dynasty. But since the Kadamba dynasty came before the time frame that we are discussing in this lesson, we are not focusing on that here. The first dynasty that is of importance to us was the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. The Gurjara Pratihara dynasty ruled from 700 to 975, and this dynasty was established in Rajasthan by Harichandra. And from this we learnt that men from enterprising families went on to taking up military professions and founding their own dynasties or kingdoms. It is considered that this Gurjara Pratihara dynasty originated from the Gurjaras, who were pastoralists and fighters. Then we now move on to the next dynasty that we discussed in this discussion, and it was the Rashtrakutas. The Rashtrakutas ruled from 735 to 982, and the Rashtrakutas ruled in the Deccan region, that is the southern part of the Indian continent. This Rashtrakuta dynasty was founded by Dantidurga. We learnt that Dantidurga founded this Rashtrakuta dynasty by overthrowing his Chalukyan overlord. So this was the second dynasty that we discussed in this lesson. Last but not the least, let us quickly go over another dynasty that ruled over the northern and eastern part of the Indian subcontinent. This was the Pala dynasty. This dynasty ruled from 750 to 1162. The Pala dynasty was founded by Gopala, who unified Bengal and brought Bihar or Magadha under his control. And in this Pala dynasty, it was Gopala's son Dharmapala who was the most important ruler. We discussed how Dharmapala founded the Vikramshila University at Bhagalpur. We also saw that Dharmapala had constructed a vihara at Somapura to provide shelter to the Buddhist monks, especially during the rainy season. Now you must be wondering why we are focusing on these three dynasties alone. It has to be for some reason that these three dynasties are of importance in our discussion. In our subsequent lesson, we will find out something that was happening among the three dynasties, that is among the Gurjara Pratiharas, Rashtrakutas and the Palas, and how this contributed to the political disintegration of the Indian subcontinent. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.